Well, hey, everybody, my name is Harold. I'm an alcoholic. Can you hear me? I'm at my home group tonight, AA on the Rock. So I'm in this little cavity in the church here, and I feel like I'm in a prison cell, but I'm not. There may be some background noise as people come in the meeting, and they're going to wonder why I'm sitting here talking to you. And some of the people may even holler out my name or whatever when they come through, or give me some kind of trouble, or holler expletives. Who knows what they'll do? But don't be shocked that there's some background noise just for a little bit as they come in and get settled. My name's Harold Long. I'm an alcoholic. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, the Big Mo State, Show Me State. My sobriety date's April 7th, 1987. My home group is AA on the Rocks. Again, it meets here in South City on St. Louis on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. And we're a strong three-legacy group, and we've been here for quite a few years. I come from a great line of sponsorship, and I tell you all those things because it's made a big difference in how my life's turned out. And so I'm glad to be here with you. The reason I came down to the home group tonight is my buddy Henry, one of my best AA buddies who I've done more 12-step stuff with than anybody in sobriety. He's doing the steps for the whole month for the group. And so he's doing the last 3, but he's getting ready to move somewhere out east where you're at, or down to Florida or somewhere. And he's getting ready to go on about a 3 to 4 week trip around the east and the south to find a new place to live, him and his wife. So I wanted to spend time with him before he got out the door. So we broke bread before the meeting, and I'm down here, and I'll catch the last part of AA on the Rocks when we're done. It's birthday night at AA on the Rocks, which is always exciting. And we celebrate with hot dogs and cake. What a great combination, right? Hot dogs and cake. And so that we'll celebrate big time with that tonight afterwards. But I'm glad to be here with you. Welcome to the Spring House and the other places. It's great to see all you guys back with us, and all the new people. If you're brand new and you're just jumping on here for the first time tonight and you haven't been with us all along, well, welcome. We're doing a workshop called the Five Big Delusions. And I'm just going to give a brief synopsis where we came from that leads us up to tonight, and then I'll dive into number 5. But this workshop was born out of the Department of Corrections. It's something we put together to educate probation and parole boards. They requested we do that. And so as part of CPC, PI, and the corrections team, we all collaborated. And then ultimately I put this together, and it just got shaped into what it is. We're not just saying there's just 5 big delusions. There's obviously all kinds of delusions, but this illness, this malady that we have, just being a human being, is definitely highly embedded in delusion. And so that is what we're going to be, where this all comes from. And so that's how I got started. It's just been done a handful of times. And then when we got virtual, we did it a few more times, and Jimmy partnered with me to do that. And we've done it, I don't know, 3 or 4 times so far. So we thank you for allowing us to come and inviting us to come and do this workshop. It's been a privilege to be here with you. And I've had some great dialogue with many of you off camera on separate phone calls and such. And so it's been meaningful to me, and I've been blessed because of it. But the 5 big delusions, simply delusion number 1 is I'm not alcoholic. And that delusion wipes out most of us. And if we're here tonight and we've survived that, and we have a desire not to drink, and then we really got to praise God for that, because the delusion, I'm not like other people. The delusion that I can drink without consequences, with impunity, without any problems is, well, from your own experience how powerful that delusion is, that illusion. And as the book would tell us on page 30, that illusion that we can somehow, some way, someday drink like other people, that has to be smashed. We have to smash that idea. So if that's been smashed for you, then I would encourage you really to praise God and give God a lot of glory for that. It's been smashed for me now since 1987. But I came to AA for the first time in 1979 through the Department of Corrections. That's where I was introduced to AA. And I went to my first treatment center in 1980, but I was far from conceding. This delusion still had me in its web. I was still very much under its influence. And I was far from conceding that I was powerless over alcohol. And I did everything but kill myself in the process. And I'm lucky to have survived. I'm lucky that I'm still incarcerated, still today, for some of the stuff I got into in my life. But I was able to surrender, and God found me on a jailhouse floor once again on a bunch of more charges, parole violation on my way back to the penitentiary. But that was in that space is where I finally surrendered and I conceded. And I became willing. A level of willingness came over me that I never had before. And from that day till now, I've been walking with you people. And so delusion number one is I'm not alcoholic. Delusion number two is we were blessed to be able to confess and concede that we're alcoholic to our innermost selves. But then the delusion of victimization, the delusion that, yes, I'm alcoholic, but man, it's not my fault. And we just don't want to take any ownership for our life. And we pass the buck, and we got excuses as long as the Mississippi River and alibis and for why our life's all jacked up, for why we've had all the consequences we've had, why I'm emotionally a wreck, why I'm mentally a wreck, why I just haven't accomplished anything in my life. And so we have a blame list. And as our inventory would tell us in the big book, it would say that concluded others was wrong is about as far as most of us ever got. Well, that was me. And that was most likely you. And so that delusion was hard. It was hard to toss that victim card because I had so many things to point to why my life was a mess. And some of them are very valid. So I'm not dismissing the trauma and the drama and some of the assault that you've had on your life, however you've suffered it. I'm not dismissing it. I'm just saying that we have to get to a space where we take ownership for our part, knowing that we play a role in our life. And that really is, especially as adults, when we get here, that everything we have in our life, we've attracted it to us by who we've become. And we have to take ownership for that. And if we don't, well, we can continue to drink and it's not our fault. We can drink ourselves to death and it's not our fault. We can blow our veins out. We can blow our nostrils out. We can blow our lungs out. Man, we can blow our brains out and it's not our fault. We can sit in a 9x7 or 10x6 jail cell for the rest of our lives and it's not our fault. And it's just a hard delusion to overcome, but thank God for the fourth and fifth step, which really liberated me, hopefully liberated you from that victim. And I was able to finally toss that victim card and take ownership of my life. And that was the beginning of real change and real transformation in my life. But nothing happened really at any real level till I got to that. But it segued right into the next big delusion, which delusion is that the element of time has passed me by. It's too late for a guy like me to reconcile my life, to restore my life, to have any meaningful value in life. This delusion of impossibility. I broke too many hearts. I burnt too many bridges. So there's little hope that my life's really going to amount to anything. So why even try? I want to do all this step work, do all this sober stuff so I can take commercial transportation and work minimum wage jobs, live in beat up old, furnished apartments or halfway houses for the rest of my life. So that's where my mind was at. And this delusion is powerful. And when that delusion stays with you long enough in your mind, it makes its way into your soul. And when it gets into your soul, it creates a whole lot of discouragement. And when your soul is full of discouragement, guess what you do? You quit. You give up. And I can promise you there may be some of you sitting there right now with that. I'm in this spring house. I'm in this treatment center. I'm here for 30 days. I'm here for 60 days. And if I get out of here, what do I do next? What am I really going to do? Where am I even going to get a job? I'm a convicted felon. I don't have a license. I don't have a home plan. My parents don't want anything to do with me. I've lost my kids. The kids haven't talked to me in 20 years. All this stuff. And we can get lost in that delusion that it's just impossible for my life to ever be put back together. It's like we come here with a 1,000-piece puzzle. This is our life in a Ziploc bag. Everybody can see it. Here it is. Here's my life. And AA asked us, and a bunch of people gather around the table and say, just dump it out, Harold. Just dump it out on the table. And we dump this 1,000-piece puzzle out on the table. And it looks impossible to put it together. It looks totally impossible to make any of it happen. And as we start to put it, you realize there's pieces missing, and that adds to more discouragement. And you look at other people who seem to have their puzzle a little bit more together. And it just seems impossible that our lives are ever going to amount to anything. And this delusion is very powerful, and it can keep us stuck there to the point that we just give up, to the point we won't even start, the point that we won't ever get started in our step work. Because why? Because it's not going to change my life. The damage is done. It's beyond repair. It's past, as the old classic rock song Kansas would say, the point of no return. And the older you are with this delusion, the more powerful it is. So if you're 40 years old, you're 50 years old, you're 60 years old, 80 years old, when you get here and you start to drink, the older you are, this delusion is on to the power of 10. It's just too late for me, man. Some of these people have died. How am I going to reconcile that and all this stuff? And that's a powerful delusion. And that's why we have a recidivism rate in our prison system of 60 to 70%, because people have already given up before they ever got out. because everything's stacked against them. They're behind the 8 ball, and it seems impossible. And guess what? On our own will, on our own resources, on our own power, it is impossible. But it's not impossible if if we're rightly related to this power we talk about here. If we're rightly related with the world, it comes together. There's a story. There's a great story about a guy, a single dad who was just really consumed with himself, and it was Monday Night Football, and he really loved to watch the football, and the Giants were on. He's going to watch the Giants play on football, and this kid, 7-8-year-old kid, just kept pestering, "Hey, Dad, come on, man. Let's play, let's play, let's play." And he kept trying to find things for him to do to keep him distracted so he could watch this football game. And finally, he looks down, he sees this paper open, this newspaper, and he sees the picture of the world. It's a big picture of the planet Earth. So he rips it out of the paper and he tears it up in a bunch of pieces. He scrambles it all together like a puzzle. He puts it in a hat and hands it to his son. He says, "Here, go take that, put that together. When you got that together, come get me and I'll come and hang out with you." Figuring that he'd keep him busy long enough he could get a good chunk of this game in. And so the kid goes away, but this really within minutes, he comes back. And he comes back and he goes, "I am done, Dad." He goes, "What do you mean you're done?" He goes, "I'm done. I got it all done." He says, "Well, how's that possible? How did you do all that?" He says, "Well, on the other side of that page was a picture of a man. And what I learned was if you put the man together, the world comes together pretty easy." And see, that's really what happens to us here, is that when we get our stuff together, the impossible starts to make sense. The 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4 anymore. Spiritual mathematics kicks in, and the impossible starts to become possible. And the things you just sit there and go, wow, you never saw it coming. You don't even know how it's worked out. You just kind of look back. You got to pinch yourself sometimes. I do all the time. Pinch myself to where I sit with you tonight, to where I came from. It just still blows my mind 34 years later. And so but to overcome that delusion is a big hurdle. But I was able to do that, and it changed my life, and it led on to a whole bunch of things that we talked about. But it still leaves us with this delusion of spiritual disqualification, is what I call it. That I'm spiritually disqualified. And it's because a lot of twisted perceptions I had about God, but it's also all this stuff. I brought this box of certainty. I was so certain God was this way when I got here. And I didn't ask for everything that was in this box. It was just given to me through life, through family, through church, through school, through culture, context, all that put what was in my box. You all came with your box. I had my box. But I was certain, for whatever reason, that this is how God is. And because of my ideology, my twisted perception of who God was, it left me spiritually disqualified. I hadn't worked any real steps. So the channel, between me and the heavenly realm, the world of the spirit, the fellowship of the spirit, however you want to frame it, but this channel was completely clogged. There was nothing getting through this channel. And so as I sat here and I go to meetings, I hear people talk about this higher power and how God changed their life, and they can feel the spirit in the room, they can feel the spirit in their heart, and God really spoke to them in that reading. God really spoke to me through your talk. All that kind of stuff just didn't really resonate with me. God sounded like this. And it left me feeling like, well, maybe I'm just disqualified. But I was doing another workshop earlier today. We're going through the book As Bill Sees It. We were talking on the subject of ambition. In one of Bill's readings, Bill had this quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it. It's not exactly right, but it's close. But Bill said this is how he felt emotionally. He said, the perverse feeling in his perverse heart left him feeling like he was the lowest creature of God's creatures. He was the lowest figment of all God's creatures. This is the mindset he had of himself. And so that was kind of where I was at. I broke a lot of hearts. I burned a lot of bridges. I did a lot of flat evil things. I did a lot of terrible things. And it's like, how can you be forgiven of that? How can you reconcile that and still have another chance at life, to have a new lease on life, to have a new opportunity? It just didn't make any sense to me. And because I'd already disqualified myself long ago. I knew what a knucklehead I was well into my early part of my drinking, the people I hurt, the things I did. And so this is where I was at. And I had God in this box. And what happened is what happened to Bill, it happened to Abby, it happened to all of us as we go through the lineage. But ultimately what happened is we were given the freedom, the liberation to dump this box of certainty, to take God out of this box. And that happened for Bill when he sat with Abby, and Abby finally gave him the famous quote, hey, Bill, why don't you just choose your own conception of God? And it was a mind-blowing moment. It was an epiphany for Bill. Because, you know, if you read Bill's story all the way up to that, he's telling you everything that's in his box. He had this box of certainty. And basically, Evie just went, why don't we just start fresh? And why don't you just choose your own idea of what this looks like? And as Bill would go on to write, and I think I mentioned it last week, if you read this, the best of Bill, the very first paragraph on the section on faith, and I'm paraphrasing again, but he basically says that the language we turned our will and life over to the care of God as we understood God is the most important language in the entire vocabulary of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the most important language. And I can concur more. It truly, truly is. It's what liberates us. It's what allows us to deconstruct all the junk we come here with. A lot of it we didn't ask for, and most of it's at a subconscious level. But it helps us deconstruct that and reconstruct something that makes sense. And that's what happened. And to get past that, you know, and that really came through 4 and 5. It came from telling somebody my entire life story by getting the tube. You know, this is your tube, this is your channel. It was completely clogged with resentments and fears and twisted sex ideas and crimes that I committed and all kinds of stuff. And some of it I never got caught for, never held accountable for. This is all the stuff in my channel. And if there's anything in your channel, you're not going to get through. If there's a bridge between you and God and there's something blocking the bridge, nothing's getting over the bridge. And so if you're sitting here tonight and you feel spiritually disconnected, you feel spiritually disqualified, the $1 million question you have to ask yourself is, what's in your channel? What's blocking you? And this will be the question for the rest of our lives. What's in my channel? And things, being life happens. You know, the big pillars of life happen. You know, we're going to have to deal with, if we live long enough, we're going to have to deal with aging and all the challenges that come along with that. We're going to have to deal with getting ill, as we witnessed with lots of people here in the last 2 years. And eventually we're going to have to deal with the whole idea of death, every one of us, and not just for ourselves, but the people we love. All this stuff in life gets into our channel. And once it gets into our channel, it starts the blockage. And once I get blocked off, then the fear comes in, and then self-reliance comes in, and then followed by the big T word, TROUBLE, trouble. That's what comes next. And so this channel has to stay clear. So those are the first 4 delusions that I think all of us in some fashion or another, we all have to work through that stuff. But it leads us to this 5th one we're going to talk to tonight. Now, all these delusions are really fed by the delusion of inequality, the delusion that I'm not enough, and this started long before we drank, and every human being suffers from this. It's not just alcoholics. We just seem to be an extreme version of this. But what you think of me paralyzes me. And as we shared today in the other workshop, it's Bill would use his own language. It's an all or nothing game. Either I'm victor or I lose. I'm either number one or I'm a loser. And regardless of what it took for that self-gratification, you know, whatever consequences, whoever I had to step on, step over, step around, I was willing to do that to get my way and all an attempt to fulfill this gap in my life, this hole in my soul of feeling totally inadequate, because the culture we live in drives that. We turn our will and lives over to materialism and individualism and consumerism and secularism. It's got its teeth in us, and it drives us. If we're honest about it, it drives our life. It drives what we wear, how we talk, what we walk, what we listen to, what we read, what we watch. It drives all that. And you just want to be in the vogue. You want to be relevant. And most of my life, you know, the voices in my head, the dispositions in my life was I was not relevant. I didn't fit in. And that's what I kept trying to do, is fit in. And finally, I showed up to you people, and I finally had the sense of belonging I've been looking for my entire life. And I found it right here with you people. And I knew I belonged here pretty quick, that you were my people. This is a place where I could plant a flag and blossom, where I could bloom. As the old saying goes, bloom where you're planted. And that's where we get to in life. And so that leads us to this place, and then we're going to talk about this whole delusion of inequality leads us to the point of, what is the purpose for my life? And so that's the questions we all start out with. Every human being has these questions. Who am I? What's my life about? What happens to me when I die? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to act? all these big life questions, we all have it. But the question, when you sit here and you go, what is my purpose? I'm doing all this stuff. I'm going to stay sober forever, one day at a time. I'm not going to drink. In the beginning, it's like, I'm never going to have fun anymore. I'm doing all this for what? For what purpose am I doing this? And again, that's still very self-centered thinking, because I'm still looking out for my own. It's all about self-preservation. What's in it for me? It's like the old radio station. When you wake up in the morning, the radio station on your head, WIIFM, what's in it for me? Is defaulted on that station. And we really lean into that and we crank it up and we get into it. What's in it for me? What's the world going to offer me? What are you going to do for me? And it's just ingrained in us. And living for our own self-interest will always leave us empty. We'll find moments of happiness when things go our way. Bill calls it a delirious happiness. It's a delirious happiness. When things are going my way, it's great. But when they fall short, then I become resentful and I get depressed. But no matter what, I'm still living for my own self-interest. And the delusion is that somehow or another, I'm going to find wholeness. I'm going to find happiness. I'm going to find freedom. And I'm going to find joy in this affair, in this journey of self-interest. And you see it. They make movies about it every week. Dramas are all built around it. Watching worlds implode. And Bill himself left us with this. Bill said that what the big things we have to look out for, and this is Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole, and he calls it the big three, and he lists this up in the traditions, but he calls it the big three. And he said the things that we have to watch out for, and it applies to us as individuals, is power, glory, and prestige. It's the pursuit of that stuff that will destroy us. And it truly, truly is. And I, so I struggle with this purpose. Why am I here? What's it about? And of course, like most people, I got lost in the game. I got sober. I started working steps. My life started to change. Opportunities come. I shared that quote with my sponsor that when preparation meets opportunity and God does the introduction, amazing things can happen. Well, that started to happen for me. Money came my way. Marriages, kids, all this stuff started coming my way. And I wasn't prepared to handle any of it. It consumed me. And it left me pretty empty. And the more stuff I got, the more fear I had in my life, the more worry I had in my life, the more headaches I had in my life, the more drama I had in my life. And it left me empty, like, what's this all about? And I get a little taste of victory, but it quickly leave, and then I'm off chasing the next rabbit. And so this is the delusion we got in there. There's no real purpose for our life. But we have to grow into this. And as we live into the steps, and Bill calls it on page 109 of the 12 and 12, he's got a term for it. He calls it the magnificent reality. The magnificent reality that we find out, that we discover, is that when we discover there's value to our life, that our life isn't washed up, despite that we come from a lot of trauma, that we come from a lot of heartache, emotional abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, spiritual abuse, whatever it is. We come with a checkered past, with crimes and felonies and broken hearts and burnt bridges. Despite all those things, I still have a chance to live into the ultimate purpose, which is God's eternal purpose. That's the ultimate purpose. And in AA, we talk about purpose. Everything here we do is driven by purpose. We read it tonight, the preamble, our primary purpose. So we have our primary purpose, we have our singleness of purpose, we have our group purpose. Then we also have our real purpose, which we find that language on page 77 of the bib book. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be a maximum service to God and the people in our life. And so the ultimate question is what is your purpose statement? If someone asks you that, what is your purpose statement? I mean, and I think if you don't have one, then you're probably not going to ever really achieve your purpose. I mean, AA gives us language for it. But I need to personalize. I need to make it my own. What is my life about? Am I going to live for my own self-interest, or am I going to live for God's interest? And I can just tell you in my own experiences, I've lived a long time striving for self. But when I got into God's interest and really just got sold out for that, it changed my life. It changed my life. And so that begins the minute we walk in here. Hey, kid, make some coffee, pick up some chairs. Go over there and stand there and greet people, come in. These little acts that seem petty, they seem ridiculous. We even see that language on page 152 where the alcoholic asked the AA community, do you have a sufficient substitute for AA, for alcohol, King Alcohol? And the book responds with yes. But it's vastly more than that. It's a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then the rebuttal is, well, am I going to be consigned to be one of those self-righteous people or one of those people with a big cheesy grin? I'm paraphrasing. That's walking around going, hey, welcome to AA. You know, one of those dudes. I don't want to be that guy. You know, am I going to be consigned to that? You know, and this is part of that balance. Again, it's self. Am I, the great I, am I going to do this? Am I going to do, I mean, it's all self. What our book says, the root of our problem is self, extreme self-centeredness. So trying to get detached from that. So something's got to happen in this channel. And when this channel gets clear, there's an opportunity. And it gives us the third step prayer promises. Is that when step 3, it says, you know, here we are, step 3. What do we mean by that? And what do we do? And it says we have to be convinced that any life run on self can hardly be a success. And that's a lesson I've had to learn over and over and over again. Am I convinced that any life run on self can hardly be a success? And then it says next, hereafter in the drama of life, that we got a new employer. We got a new director. You know, he's the director, I'm the agent, you know, go on down. And use all the metaphors you want to bring that analogy to life. But it goes on to give us a third step prayer promises. It says, if I stick close to him and perform his work well, here's what's going to happen. And I'm paraphrasing for the sake of time, but he goes on to say that we're going to become less and less interested in our little plans, our little designs, our little schemes. And we're going to become more and more interested in what we can contribute to life. And it's going to end the promises with this one little statement, one little sentence that says, we were reborn. We've got a whole new lease on life. We've been totally transformed. This delusion of no purpose in our life gets moved to where we really know we have value in our life, especially as we've healed from our past and we reconciled with our past, we've made amends, and we swallowed some big chunks of truth about ourselves. We've shared our entire life story with another human being. We've actually done the work. And the work is when we're done, it's when we get to step 10, it says, now you've entered the world of the spirit. And what's our chief purpose? It's to grow in understanding and effectiveness for the rest of our lives. Effectiveness for what? Being a maximum service, to live in a life of love and service. But the goal isn't to do service. So I think we get lost in that sometimes. We make service the idol. We make service the higher power. And we chase service. Well, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that. I'm going to do this. No, if we're rightly related to God, then love and service is the byproduct of that. That's the fruits of that relationship. It becomes natural. But when I'm chasing I'm going to go do service, go do service, go do service, I want to get burnt out on that eventually. And I'm going to be done with it. You'd be amazed how many people I've met, been sober a long time, when you go share a service talk or you're telling your story and they come up to you afterwards and go, hey, I used to do prison work 20 years ago. Hey, I used to go to the treatment centers 10 years ago. And they're living off living off memories instead of using their imagination to stay alive doing this stuff. So having a really purpose-driven life is imperative for our life. But something has to be transformed in our life. And when that transformation happens, the purpose, there's a shift in our purpose. Our idea of what our world's about becomes less and less about the world system, less and less about our own interests, but more and more important what God would have me be and what God would have me do. And it gives us a lot of really encouraging things to say. On page 124, it tells us this, and I'm paraphrasing again, but cling, it uses this language, cling to the idea that your dark past becomes the greatest asset that you possess. Cling to that thought. Now, if you've healed from that, that's true. If you haven't healed from it, it's not true because you're still running from your past. You're still hiding it. But if you've brought it out of the dark into the light and you've allowed God to heal it through the 4 through 9, then your dark, it becomes a great asset for you. Because you can admit, you can save people from tremendous adversity, from even death even. Why? Because you speak the language of the heart. You can speak a language that no trained professional will ever speak. And that's our purpose. On page 29, it refers to the back of the stories. And these people, each one of them in their own way is going to tell you how they develop a relationship with God. And we hope that nobody hears these stories in bad taste. Our hope is after you hear these stories, you're going to say, yeah, I'm one of them too, and I want what you got. And so it's just, you find that there's tremendous purpose for your life. And again, God wants us to use that. And it's just to live a life of love and service. And it's not just consigned to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's about everything we do from the moment we get up to the person we see at the gas station, to our neighbor next door, to our coworker. This demeanor of love and service is how we live our life. But the beautiful place is that we have a huge agriculture field of harvest where we get the privilege, friends, if we truly heal from alcoholism and we truly live into this thing of one alcoholic helping another. If I truly live into that, the book says that if I truly live into it, that the most satisfactory years of my existence lie ahead, that my imagination is going to be fired. And then I'm going to have the privilege, and I love that language, that I'm going to have the privilege to walk shoulder to shoulder with other people and help them rediscover life. Friends, that's purpose on steroids. And I'm going to get to walk shoulder to shoulder with other people, help them rediscover life. And then it goes on to say this is at the top of page 153. Then it goes on to say that, and when you've done that long enough, and again, I'm paraphrasing, you're going to finally know what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. And friends, that is the transformation. It's 18 inches from our head to our heart. And when that shift happens, you're just never the same person for the rest of your life. My purpose started in the Salvation Army Skid Row missions. That's where my sponsor told me to go. And he said, Harold, I want you to do two things I want you to do these two things for the rest of your life. And if you do these two things for the rest of your life, you're going to have a storybook life. And number one is you always have a new man you're walking with. And you can find that promise on page 100. It's the first full paragraph. It's probably one of the boldest promises in our book. But you and the new man must walk day by day on the path of spiritual progress. And if you persist, again, there is the key verbiage. If you persist, all sorts of remarkable things are going to happen. And then the other thing he says, I want you committed to go somewhere once a week where you don't want to end up. You can choose that, but find out where you want to go. And for me, that was the Skid Row missions here in St. Louis, about 10 minutes from where I'm at right now in the city of St. Louis, at the Salvation Army Harbor Light. And I went there every Thursday night and every Saturday morning for 3 years. It was the toughest day I ever did. Skid Row, homeless shelter combined. Most broken men I've ever met in my life. But it really shaped who I was. It really shaped how I did AA. And then in 93, I got an invite to come into the Department of Corrections and do AA, which I thought was a joke when they called me. They said, hey, man, would you want to come down to this prison and talk? I started laughing. I go, dude, do you know who you're talking to? They said, yeah. I said, they're not going to let me come to that prison. He goes, well, man, I think you've been off paper long enough that you can get in. I said, look, even if they would let me come in, let's just play, let's pretend. I made a pact many years ago. I ain't never going back behind that side of the fence for you or nobody else. And he chuckled at me and said, well, why don't you run that by your sponsor and call me back? And you know how that went. And so I got into the Department of Corrections, and I've been there ever since. And I've spent well over 25 years now doing AA and mostly maximum security prisons. And I could sit here for the weekend and tell you story after story, but I'll tell you this one real fast, and then I'm going to close and hand it to Jimmy. In 1996, a gentleman walked into our A group. We have been in here about 3 years. We just started doing these workshops. We just set up the first 12-step workshop. We wrote a whole workshop right out of the big book to take inmates through the steps because we weren't really having much traction just doing a regular AA meeting. So we wrote this workshop, put it in writing, got this workshop, got it approved by the prison system. And now these guys are signing up. But this guy named Brent shows up. Brent's got 2 life sentences. He was in for second-degree murder and armed criminal action. Brent came into AA the same way everybody comes into AA, but especially behind the walls. He came in with his arms crossed like this, and he sat at the meeting. Why? Why do people sit like that? Because they listen with their eyes. They listen with their eyes, and they think with their feelings. Let me say it again. They listen with their eyes, and they think with their feelings. That's why when we hear that language, our chief responsibility is to deliver an adequate demonstration of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why, because they're listening with their eyes. They're watching. And this will go on for 6 months before their arms go down. Just because they don't trust you. You know, what's some gray-haired white guy doing here? What does he want? Why is he here? What does he want from me? But it takes time to earn that credibility, but you get that credibility. But he came, and eventually his arms come down, and then he signed up for the workshop. And I watched the same 12 group of principles of the 12 steps that totally transformed my life, transformed his life. And it happened over time. I watched him get a 5-year setback and a 3-year setback and all that, and on and on and on. Eventually in 2006, he walks in and goes, hey, you're never going to believe it. He's got a smile that wraps all the way around his head. He says, you're never going to believe what happened. I said, I come here every week anticipating something awesome is going to happen. He goes, well, I got an out date. I go, you got an out date? He goes, yeah, I'm going home in 2 years. 2008, I'm going home. And so in 2008, he got out, did 21 years to the day. And he got out and I said, well, you call me when you're on your way home. And he called me on the phone. He's on his cell phone. He's like, hey, man, I'm on this cell. He goes, I'm on this thing called a cell phone. It's pretty cool, man. I've never been on one before. I said, yeah, Brent, I've had one for a few years now. I'm pretty hip on the cell phones. He goes, well, I'm out and I'm with my wife. He reconciled with his wife and all that stuff while I was in prison after coming into the program. I said, well, go home and enjoy yourself and call me in the morning. And so the next morning, friends, he called me. I'll never forget this phone call until I die. He called me up and he says, man, you're going to never guess what I've been doing all morning. And I said, well, let's see. You haven't been with your wife for 21 years. I know what you've been doing all morning. He started laughing. He goes, no, man, I ain't talking about that. I said, what are you talking about? He says, man, I've been opening gifts all morning. I said, gifts? I mean, what, like welcome home gifts? He goes, no, man. I've been opening Father's Day gifts, birthday gifts, and Christmas gifts since 1996. And my heart just melted like butter. Because that's when he started his journey with us, when his life started to get reconciled, when his life started to come back together, and then 2 + 2 didn't equal 4 anymore, and the impossible started to become possible. And he said, you'll never guess what I got for Christmas of 1997. And I started laughing. I said, what did you get, man? He said, I got a Miami's Dolphin jacket. And for whatever reason, his delusional mind, he liked the Miami Dolphins. You know, he'd never been to an NFL game in his life, but he liked the Dolphins. And I said, but this is how spiritual mathematics works, Brent. I have 4 tickets to give you to watch the Rams play the Dolphins in 4 weeks here in St. Louis. And he couldn't believe it. He says, who am I going to take? I said, you take whoever you want. He said, will you go? I said, absolutely. I'll go. Are you kidding me? He says, let's take Big Book Bob. Big Book Bob had life in 45. And let's take Gary. Gary had life in 20. All these guys started in that work together. All of them had, their lives were transformed. All of them were out. We went to the game, had a time of our life. At halftime, the lady in front of us turned around and said, hey, you guys are having a heck of a lot of fun. I said, yes, ma'am, we are. She goes, I've been watching you guys. She goes, you guys aren't even drinking. I said, no, ma'am, we're not even drinking. She goes, it's a good thing. And I said, why is that? She goes, because you guys, like you, the way you're carrying on, you guys would end up in prison or something. And of course, we all started laughing. She had no idea who she was talking to. And, but what happened? I discovered the purpose for my life. I didn't think I had a purpose. I didn't think my life was of value of anything at this point in my life. But when I healed, when the channel got cleared and I lived into this thing, there was that shift. I got off the old train, I got off the new. I got off this train of self-interest into this gain of God's interest, and it changed my life. And his taste is so good, I never stopped from that day till now. And I'm still committed to those 2 things. I always got a new guy. I got a whole boatload of them here tonight at the home group. And I always go somewhere once a week where I don't want to end up. And it's made a huge difference in my life. So I don't know where you're on your journey, but I hope you discover your purpose and where God wants you to plug into. And I hope that when you find it, that you come all the way into it, that you sit all the way down with it, and that you stay with it. It'll make a big difference in how your life turns out. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Harold. Excellent. I could hear that. I've heard that story a million times. I love that story. No matter what, it brings a tear to my eye all the time. But good evening, everybody. My name is Jimmy. I am an alcoholic. Grateful to be alive and sober. I have a home group here in Jersey called the Design for Living Group. And always looking at Cynthia when you do that. Down on the Jersey Shore. I have a sponsor, service sponsor a lot of guys. And I've been sober since my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was on March 28th, 1987. So somebody asked me, well, I've been asked this a few times, why do you always say you've been sober since your first meeting? Because I think it's important to let you know that you never have to drink again. It's that simple, really. You know, especially you girls, I'm looking at you girls in that picture over at the spring house over there. And whether you your first time or whether it's your 100th time there, I'm here to let you know you never have to drink again. Now, life might get quite difficult at times, and life might get quite fearful at times, and you might get quite angry at times. You might even get quite thirsty at times, but you never have to pick up a drink again. You know, but what I found out, there's a condition on that. And the condition is this, that I need to get into these 3 legacies, these things that we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. I need to put my one hand into God and my one hand to Alcoholics Anonymous, because I was promised I would never pick up a drink if I did that. And for the last 34 years, that's been working for me. And I know it's been working for Harold. And And I love Harold. He's a close friend. And, a couple of weeks ago, he mentioned to the group that he was going to be a grandfather. And he has a beautiful granddaughter now. Well, now I don't want him to steal all the thunder, because I want to officially announce tonight that I'm going to be a grandfather. So, it's officially official in my life too. But unlike Harold, I'm going to change diapers, because I love the effect produced by a clean diaper. That's for sure. So it's very exciting in my family, and it's been a crazy year. My mom passed away 1 year tomorrow, and life goes and life comes, and that's life, right? And it's really amazing. So I'm excited to be here again for our last. It's amazing how quick this thing goes. You 4 weeks and you're thinking, oh man, I got to do 4 weeks and it's over already. But this delusion, no real purpose for my life. I've said this before. All ponds and streams lead to the river, right? And for me, all the delusions we've talked about, and the many, many, many we haven't talked about, bring me to draw this conclusion that, like Harold said, I have no real purpose for my life. And when I'm driven by a mind that's filled with delusions, a mind that's insecure, a mind that's filled with fear, there are times when I believe that my life has no value. Now, I'm not talking about suicidal no value. I'm talking about feelings of uselessness. And what I couldn't see, and it took me a long time in the rooms of alcoholics that I had some kind of purpose or value, and you hear this saying all the time, we live life forward, you understand it looking back. I see God all over my life looking back, and how God was pushing me, prodding me, walking me down paths that I never thought I'd walk down, but I couldn't see it when I was doing it. And one thing that really jumps out at me is early sobriety and doing a old-fashioned 12-step call, which many of you old-timers in here know what I'm talking about. It was a common practice back then, where we went to many, 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 many houses. We'd get the phone call. The young guys would get the phone call by the older guys. It was usually 2 older guys. They call you up and they say, be downstairs in 10 minutes, and we'd be downstairs in 10 minutes, and they'd pick us up and we'd go to some guy's house. And it was the same routine every time. Jimmy, I want you to go look for weapons, go see if there's a gun around or anything like that might cause a problem. He would tell the other guy to go check on the wife and the kids. And then we would watch the magic. And the magic would be these 2 old guys would sit with that alcoholic at his kitchen table or down at the couch in his living room. And what they would do is just share their stories, and again, I'm just along for the ride, right? I didn't understand that there was value in that. I didn't understand that eventually I would be that older guy, bringing some young guys with me to go 12-step somebody, So, that just started off early in my sobriety, but I couldn't see that there was a purpose in that. I remember I was about, 6, 7 months sober. And I finally scrapped a couple of $100 together, and I bought a 1976 Buick Electra, as we used to call it back in the neighborhood, a deuce and a quarter, a 225. And, it was yellow. It had a brown door. It had bald tires on it. I think I don't even know if I had insurance on it. I think I had a registration card for it. But I remember my sponsor said, Jimmy, now you can go and get guys. What do I want to get guys for? Because you want to bring them to meetings. And that sounds kind of ridiculous, but what I couldn't see is that he was giving me purpose. He said that big car, you could put 7 guys along the back seat, them all being comfortable back there. I mean, we used to load that car up, go to AA meetings, go to retreats. We used to do everything. And, again, these are just the stories that, there was such a time that I lived in such darkness. I couldn't see that I was doing anything good in Alcoholics Anonymous. A lot of you guys have heard me tell this story a million times. So, I was 18 months sober, and I'll never forget, I walked in the door of my parents' home and I found my father dead on the floor, and I'm standing over my father. I'm kind of freaked out. It's not the first time I saw a dead person, but it's my father. So it's just a different feeling going on. And I remember call on my sponsor immediately at the time. And, he told me, obviously, call 911, let's pray. And we were praying. And I could see my mom down the end of the hall crying her eyes out. And, here comes the first cop, right? And he's taking down the information. All of a sudden, he looks at me. He says, "Hey, I don't see you walking the streets anymore." I said, "Yeah, I don't do that anymore. I've been sober for about 18 months now." He goes, "Yeah, I don't even see you in the bars anymore drinking." He goes, "When did you stop drinking?" And I just started to tell this guy my story. And before you know it, over my dead father's body, I'm 12-stepping this cop, even though the only thing I knew about a 12-step was watching those older guys 12-step someone in their house. And what I can tell you about that experience is this. This guy, Brian, just celebrated 32 years this month, matter of fact. And not that I have the power to get anyone sober, but not that I have the power to get anyone drunk. But see, God has been using me, and I'm sure if you guys all look into your life, God has been using us to carry this message, to help others. And sometimes because of this darkness that I've walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous with, because at times when I'm still delusional about a lot of other things, and because I got a belly filled with anger and unmanageability and fear and insecurity that I haven't looked at, God is still leading me down this path. Now, my path is kind of similar to Harold's, but what I was thinking was, thank God Bill Wilson didn't have this delusion. Thank God at 6 months, Bill didn't say, "You know what, it's not going to work for me," right? Even despite the way he felt. Bill has a white light experience, right? And I love the language in his story on page 14 and 15, when he talks about the way he felt, even though he has a white light experience. He says, "I still have waves of self-pity and resentment." But what did he do? Well, on page 14, Ebby told him what to do. He said, "My friend emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. For particularly, it was imperative to work with others. He had worked with me. Faith without works was dead," he said. How appallingly true for the alcoholic. For an alcoholic who fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink. And if he drank, he would surely die. And again, we're all going to hit trials and tribulations. We're all going to hit adversity in life. But I believe, because of what we have been given here in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, the evidence is around me of how people have gotten through those adversities, through the trials and tribulations of life, because of the purpose that we have here is to help others, right? That's what I truly believe. Now, Bill goes on, again, going through the story, he talks about how he has this self-pity and how he has these resentments, but he knew that, this almost drove him back to drink, but he soon found out when all others failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I've gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It's a design for living that works in the rough going. An old timer used to say to me all the time, "Jimmy, you need a drink. You need a drunk not to drink. You need a drunk not to drink." And that our purpose of this love and service and to help others, not only, of course, in just an Alcoholics Anonymous, but for me, it was, in my family, in my occupation. Am I bringing these principles into all those affairs? And what does that really look like? I got involved in service, and I know Harold just talked about it. Again, I could tell you a lot of things about general service work that I've been doing for a long period of time. But again, service is just another position. It's a vital position. It's an important position in what we do here in carrying a message. But how do I serve others? How do I serve the people in my home? How do I serve, the people on my job? How do I serve my neighbors? What is the purpose I have for living, really, now that I'm a sober man? And my story is, a story of I got involved in service late in my recovery. I was 19 years sober. I didn't really believe in service work like Harold did. I was never pushed, prodded, pointed in that direction. My first 19 years of sobriety was about the home group and what we did in the home group. I never looked outside of the home group to do anything. But, we started a group down here on the Jersey Shore back in 2006. And, I became their first GSR reluctantly. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something bigger than that. But I become this GSR, and I go to a service event down in Hunt Valley, Maryland, and my life changes. Little did I know that God was going to start putting me on a path that really goes somewhere, and I started to meet people. I started to get invited and introduced to men that I just thought they were just a bunch of old timers. Little did I know the work that they were doing in Alcoholics Anonymous, like being past trustees and trustee at larges, and so, just titles, but just positions that eventually we all rotate out of. And I remembered my current service sponsor. He handed me a book, a service manual for those who don't know what that is, and in that service manual, there's a very important excerpt from a non-alcoholic who talks about us. And he poses a question to us. Why do we do the things we do in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous? Why do we have a general service conference? It's not to ensure our sobriety. We're here tonight. I know Nikki knows what to do when a newcomer comes to his door. I know Dottie knows what to do when that newcomer woman comes to her front door at her meeting. Well, what this gentleman was talking about in this little excerpt was, why we do the things we do is to help the person out there who doesn't know we're in here. Because right now, in this moment, there is someone cracking a bottle open of whiskey who's just waiting to wash his day away. Right now, from my house to your house, there is a single mom who has 3 kids who she can't wait to put down so she could just crack that bottle of wine and wash her day away. Right now, from my house to your house, there's a baby being born destined for alcoholism. So what I started to understand is that within my purpose, there's a responsibility. And the responsibility for me is to be sure that the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous are always open. Now, we all have a small part in that, but I think we've talked about joining a group, a 3 legacy group, being involved in the unity of that group, being involved in the 12 steps of recovery for our own sake and to help others with that. And then be of service in any way we can, whether it's on the group level, whether it's in our family, whether it's on the job, whether it's some activity that you do for the PAL or the YMCA or whatever you do on the outside. But the idea here is to be of service to others, because that's where we're really going to grow. And I almost missed all of that. I almost missed all of that because of my insecurity, because of my fear. And again, not everyone's going to be a delegate, not everyone's going to be a GSR, not everyone's going to be someone who goes into the prison systems. But you have to ask yourself this question: what's my gift, and how can I use that gift to be of maximum service to other people in my life? I love that little story, well, not story, but how Dr. Bob talks about those 4 purposes of why he gives this away and why he does what he does. First thing he talks about, it's a pleasure. Everyone on this call right now who has sponsored another person, who has sat across on a kitchen table to see that person come alive, it's a miracle. It's a miracle what we could do in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And all we're really doing is holding somebody's hand, as Harold said earlier, commencing down this dark pathway, shoulder to shoulder, just trying to share our experience, strength, and hope with others. But what a pleasure when we could see the lights go on in someone's eyes. Dr. Bob talks about a sense of duty. Makes me think of the responsibility pledge. When anyone anywhere reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA to always be there for that. I am responsible. Dr. Bob talks about that we all have to pay our debt. And my debt's to a guy by the name of Richie Schnorr, who 12-stepped me in Newark Airport, a complete stranger. That guy went to any lengths to help a guy like me. And I think I have a purpose in my life to go to any lengths to help anyone who asks me for help. And then more importantly, Dr. Bob talks about that last thing. It's an insurance policy. It's an insurance policy that when I'm helping others, when I'm getting out of Jimmy, when I'm starting to do things for others, whether that's in AA, whether that's in some social scene or whatever that is, it just seems like I'm not thinking about a drink anymore. And I get pulled away from that terrible mind of mine. I've just, again, I've said this 100 times, my ego wants me dead, but will settle for me drunk. So what is your purpose? What is your value? I've heard Harold say this a million times. If you don't share your story, it's a I forget how you put it, Harold, but it's a gross negligence if you don't get to share your story with others. Well, I think it's a gross negligence if you don't find your value or your purpose and to share that with other people too. And whatever way that is. And whether it's through the service structure or whether it's through, community service, whether it's working at food bank, whatever that is, just find it. Just find it. And if we live by that code of love and service, we'll never go wrong in anything that we do. So that's the gift I see in here. A lot of you guys have heard me read that paragraph out of Daily Reflections about walking into the darkness so many times. But there's another paragraph that goes on below that, which says, by revealing my secrets, by getting out of my darkness, and thereby ridding myself of the guilt, I could actually change my delusional thinking by altering my thinking. I could change myself. My thoughts create my future. What I will be tomorrow is determined by what I think today. The end of We Agnostics talks about when we drew near to him, God will disclose himself to us. The closer we get to God, God will give us our purpose. We will know intuitively what we should be doing. We know that we all have gifts, and it's really important to use those gifts. I love the language that Bill uses in the 12 and 12 when he talks about the precious gift that we all have been given here tonight. It's called sobriety. And it came about through a spiritual experience. And if you look in the 12 and 12 on step 12, he talks about when a man or woman has a spiritual awakening, the most important meaning of it is that he is now be able to do, feel, and believe that which he could not do before on his unaided strength and resources alone. He has been granted a gift which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being. He's been set on a path which tells him he's really going somewhere, that he has purpose, that you have purpose, that you have value. Just find out what that is and to take it out into the world. We have 1,000,001 promises in this book. And we always talk about the promises after the 9th step. We always talk about the promises after the 10th step, the 5th step, the 3rd step. But I love Bill's story because Bill gives us these promises. I'll just wrap it up with that in the last couple of seconds. Bill goes on to say, we commence to make many friends and a fellowship has grown among us, of which is a wonderful thing to feel a part. Promise. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. Promise. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in a path that really goes somewhere. Promise. I have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted. Promise. I've seen feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. Promise. I've seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Harold just talked about that. Promise. I've seen business and professional men have to regain their standing. Promise. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. Promise. So like we've been talking about these last couple of weeks, these delusions, the things that are separating me from you, the things that separate me from God at times. Find someone to walk this path with you. Find somebody to take you down through these 12 steps. Find what your value is or what your purpose is, to share that with others. It ends on page 164. We're talking about living in the sunlight of the spirit. We all have that opportunity, so these last 4 weeks have been very quick, and I really thank for Harold. I'll thank the group for having us. We've done this a couple of times, 4 times now, and I just want to finish on one thing that I was so moved last night by Harold and the service for this guy Mike McKillop. Many of you guys were there, and I just want to mention a big thanks to Harold for that, because Mike was the one who had us do this back in 2020. When Harold just said, hey, we're going to do this workshop and let's see where it goes. And here we are for the 4th time doing it. And who knows if God wants us to do this again? We'll find out if that happens again. But if not, it's been an unbelievable experience. But this guy, Mike, had a purpose in his life, and that was to really open up this virtual world that we're all on. And it's unbelievable that we get to sit here tonight. And this guy, Mike, was a very big part of us having these conferences and these meetings on this virtual world. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Harold for that last night. It was an incredible service, and Mike was an incredible person. And, you know, just find your purpose. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Harold. And